All right, let's dive in, shall we? Today we're taking a deep dive into the life and career of Marianne Faithfull. As many of you probably already know, she passed away recently. And while the headlines, they focus mainly on her early fame, her connection to the Rolling Stones, we're going to dig a little deeper and explore the full scope of her journey.
Yeah, definitely. Hers is a story that's full of unexpected twists and turns, you know.
Hmm.
It's a story about resilience and reinvention, this fierce creative spirit that endured through decades of both personal and professional upheaval.
So, I mean, as tears go by, everyone knows that song, right? Huge hit for a 17-year-old schoolgirl. You'd think that would have been like a clear path to superstardom. But there's this quote from her about meeting the Rolling Stones for the first time. She said, "They came up and said to the person I was with, 'Can she sing?'" It makes the whole thing sound like it was, I don't know, just pure chance, right?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if she even wanted that kind of fame so young.
It really is fascinating, isn't it, to think about how that one encounter, that chance encounter, really shaped her whole trajectory, especially when you consider the context of swinging London, that
Yeah.
that period of intense social change, you know.
Yeah.
There's this explosion of creativity. And Faithful, she was right at the heart of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just, mini skirts and parties. This was a time when people were really challenging traditional norms. Experimentation was like encouraged. There's a real sense of liberation in the air. How do you think that energy, how did that impact her development as an artist?
Well, I mean, you can really see the influence of that era in her early music and in her personal choices, too.
Yeah.
Like, take her quote about LSD, for instance. She said, "If it wasn't meant to happen, it wouldn't have been invented." That really kind of sums up that whole countercultural spirit of the time, don't you think? Pushing boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
which Faithful certainly did, both in her art and in her personal life.
Yeah. But that experimentation came with consequences, too. The drug raid at Keith Richards' house. I mean, yeah, the charges were dropped eventually, but that whole incident really cemented a certain image of her in the public eye.
Exactly. It really highlights how the media, they often fixated on like the more scandalous aspects of her life,
Yeah.
often at the expense of her actual art. It's interesting to consider how those early experiences, both positive and negative, how they might have shaped her later work.
It's hard not to see the connection between the turbulence of those early years and the direction her career ultimately took. I mean, this is where we see a real shift, right?
Absolutely. After her relationship with Jagger ended, things took a really dark turn. Her struggle with addiction and, the period of homelessness that followed, that's a stark contrast to the glamorous image that she had cultivated earlier in her career. Makes you think about the price of fame, that immense pressure, especially on young women in the music industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like this classic fall from grace story. But what's incredible is that she doesn't just fade into obscurity. Instead, this period actually leads to one of the most significant transformations in music history.
That's where Broken English comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this album, it was more than just a comeback album. It was a complete reinvention.
Yeah, it was a huge sonic shift, I mean, this is 1979, punk is exploding, new wave is emerging, and you can hear those influences in Broken English for sure. But it's also got this rawness and vulnerability that feels so uniquely Marianne.
Yeah, the album's sound
Yeah.
is so raw and powerful. And part of that is how it was recorded. It was done really quickly, almost live in the studio,
Right.
which gives it this immediacy, this urgency.
And lyrically, I mean, it's not your typical love song fare.
Oh, absolutely not. The lyrics
Yeah.
on Broken English, they're incredibly personal and unflinching. She's addressing her struggles with addiction, her experiences with heartbreak, the darker side of fame. There's this one line in the title track where she sings, "I've got a taste for men who bite." It's just so raw and honest.
Wow. Yeah. That honesty, it must have resonated with people. Because Broken English was a critical and commercial success, right?
It was huge. It charted all over the world, earned her a Grammy nomination. But even more importantly, I think it really established her as a serious artist. You know, not just a pop star, not just a figure of scandal.
Right. So she's back on top, but as we know, her struggles with addiction, they weren't over just yet. Even with this massive triumph, she still had this personal battle going on.
Yeah, her journey to recovery. It wasn't a straight line. It was a long process and a difficult one, but she got there eventually. It's
Yeah.
interesting to think about how those experiences continue to shape her music.
Yeah. You can definitely hear it in the albums that came after Broken English. There's this depth of emotion, this introspection that wasn't there before.
You see her exploring all these different genres, collaborating with a really diverse range of artists, too. People like PJ Harvey, Nick Cave, even metallic.
That's one thing that's always struck me about her. She never shied away from experimentation, from those early pop hits to like the avant-garde stuff she was doing later in her career. There's this constant evolution, this willingness to just push the boundaries.
And I think that's a big part of what makes her so fascinating as an artist. She never let herself be defined by any one genre
Yeah.
or any one period in her life. She was always evolving, always searching for new ways to express herself.
Which brings us back to this idea of resilience. She faced incredible challenges, addiction, homelessness, heartbreak, just constant public scrutiny.
Mm.
And yet she never gave up. She kept creating, kept pushing forward, kept reinventing herself.
Exactly. And you know what? She found peace later in life and a real self-acceptance, too.
Yeah.
There's this quote from her where she says, "I really do appreciate my pretty extraordinary life. I think I've been unconscious for a very long time, and only now have I begun to get it." That speaks to a real deep level of self-awareness, don't you think?
And gratitude. Yeah, it really does. It's like a reminder that growth and self-discovery, it can happen at any age, right? Never too late to look back on your life, try to make sense of it all.
Absolutely. And for Faithful, I mean, making sense of it all, that often meant channeling those experiences into her art. You can definitely hear it in her music, but also in her writing and even her spoken word performances.
She was never afraid to be vulnerable, sharing her struggles and her triumphs with the world. And in doing so, she created a connection with her audience, something that went way beyond just, entertainment.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes her legacy so powerful. She wasn't just like a talented musician. She was a survivor, an iconoclast, and a voice for those who often felt, marginalized or misunderstood.
Her story also, I don't know, it makes you think about how we define success, right? Is it about chart-topping hits or critical acclaim? Or is it about something, I don't know, something deeper, like using your art to connect with others, to make sense of your own experiences, to leave a mark on the world?
It's a really interesting question to consider, especially in the context of someone like Faithful, whose career was so marked by both triumph and tragedy. I mean, she achieved commercial success for sure, but she also faced these immense personal challenges. Ultimately, I think her legacy is about more than just the music. It's about the resilience of the human spirit, the power of reinvention, and the enduring strength of vulnerability.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Marianne Faithfull's life and career, I'm left with this, I don't know, this sense of awe, I guess, at her ability to overcome adversity and just, keep creating.
Me too.
Wow.
And I think her story offers this like valuable lesson for all of us, that it's okay to embrace our imperfections, to acknowledge our struggles, and to find strength in our vulnerability. Because it's often in those moments of darkness that we discover our true selves and we find that inspiration to create something truly meaningful.
And maybe that's the most powerful legacy of all, right? To inspire others to find their own voice, to tell their own stories, and to just never give up on that pursuit of creative expression, no matter what life throws their way.